together. So thanks everyone for joining us. We wanted to come together and kind of talk about the ongoing issue, what we perceive as an ongoing issue of misogyny in horror spaces. So not just limited to recent events or this app by itself, but just kind of everywhere. So, does everyone want to introduce themselves?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Caitlin Marceau. I'm an author. I've written a couple of novellas, This Is Where We Talk Things Out, Magnum Opus. I have two collections. One is beautifully displayed behind Naomi. I've also done Palimpsest, A Blackness Absolute, and I really like to run my mouth on Twitter. So that's sort of my thing.
Do I go next?
Yeah.
I'm Sonia. I contribute nothing but telling people online what books I like. So
Oh, you
that's,
do a very good job of it.
thank you.
And so I am Naomi. I have been a fan of horror probably since I was 8 years old when I watched Nightmare on Elm Street, and I'm aging myself probably a little bit. And I read multiple genres, but horror is my favorite. And I probably am known for being pretty vocal about this issue and also just talking a lot of crap online in general. So thanks for still showing up.
And maybe as like an aside to that, I don't have my necklace, my Worry Stone necklace. I'm just gonna be like tearing at my chest all night. But the idea like of this conversation, it's not to kind of tear anybody down, like we were discussing beforehand. It's not necessarily to tear any authors down, but we want to have more of a productive conversation and talk about like steps everybody can do as a community to make sure that this ongoing issue does decrease and the community gets more involved and kind of taking everything down a step when we do see these like cyclical issues come up.
Yeah, this is really about like trying to find collectively solutions and steps that I think we can take together to improve the community and improve the environment for everyone. And less like a dog pile or sort of like a name call. It's really a matter of like, we
Right.
just want to have an ongoing conversation. And this isn't the only conversation, right? Like this shouldn't be this shouldn't be where it starts and stops. This should be hopefully, I hope anyways, the start of more of us talking outwardly and expressively and with our whole chests about this issue.
And finding
Yeah. So
comfort
I
in
mentioned,
doing so.
yeah. I mentioned, when I first posted the advertisement for this conversation, is that I would like it to be an ongoing conversation and I would like more people to be involved, especially women, but I think men should be involved as well. And I think the only way we are really going to get at this problem is if the men start being more participants and less spectator.
Yeah, like I think stomping out misogyny is not a spectator sport. This isn't one of
Right.
those things where we can just kind of be complacent or complicit and just sort of let it happen. It really takes us collectively to come together and like put our foots down on this. I got a dinosaur
Yeah.
before. That was so cute. Thank you, whoever.
I have dinosaur
I've never seen this
bones. I want a
before.
dinosaur.
What is this?
Yeah. Feel free to ask questions
Oh,
as well.
please. Yeah. Oh man, yeah.
And I will say that, and for like the most recent situation, why this, especially this conversation is so important. So we started this conversation. I mean, I've been around in the horror genre, horror communities, old Reddit days for a number of years. And, this isn't a new conversation. It's not a new issue. But I feel the more that we talk about it, the more we get other people comfortable just even saying the word, right? Like that's been kind of the short-term goal recently, is just to have people not afraid of just saying the word. So the more that we talk about it, like with this last little issue that we did have, more men did come out and just outwardly use the word. They were completely about shutting it down, more so than we've had seen in the past. So, and I think that's because
Yeah.
we're having these conversations and encouraging people to like rally with us So
Yeah.
and my optimism, I'm like the most depressed, optimistic person in the world, but I do, like, this is exactly why I want to continue this series. So it's not a taboo
Yeah.
word. It doesn't mean
Right.
that the author that might be in question is an awful person, right? We all come at the world with our biases. You don't always necessarily check your biases when you write something. So just having them being comfortable being like, you're right, like, my bad, I didn't see that, like, let's move on and, get better at this craft or whatever. And like, that's what I would like to see come from this.
I think it was actually not that long ago, and maybe I feel like I just spoke about this today. But I think it was expert book smuggler, so Sam, who posted about the optics of being a good person, and I loved it. Like, if everyone goes and follows her, like, just tremendous, just community member to begin with. But there was like a really wonderful post that essentially talked about how it's more important to do the work and be a good person than appear to be a good person. If you're not willing to own up to the fact that you make mistakes, because we all make mistakes, we're all human,
Right.
then
Yeah.
like that, it doesn't really matter if you look like a good person if you're not putting in the work to improve yourself. And I thought that was just a fantastic post and so relevant to this discussion, because I think it can be really easy for people to feel like if they've made a mistake, or if they have, supported peers or creators who have been misogynistic, or air quotes problematic in the past,
Right.
that somehow is a reflection of them as a person, or them as an author or a creator. And I think one of the things that's really important, especially as we are trying to like meet people where they are and move everyone in a positive direction, that it's important to remember that you're allowed to make a mistake. You can screw up, and apologizing and being sincere about it and putting in that legwork to correct yourself, to me, means more than having always been perfect to begin with. So
Right. Yeah, I don't think that we're not really expecting everyone to be perfect, and we're hoping that people grow, because the idea is not to write off people completely for not recognizing when something is misogynistic, and for not being able to come to terms with like the responsibility that you have in the position of power that you're in, whether you want to be in that position of power or not. Because some of these authors are in a place where they have more responsibility, I feel like, because they have such a large following, which leads to large influence. Now, if I had that sort of following, I would feel really uncomfortable with that. I wouldn't want it,
sure.
but at some point you have to recognize that you do have it, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so I am going to talk a little bit about what the situation that happened recently when we have, some of the authors, and I know Daniel's in here, and I'm very happy that he is here, come out, and Daniel was able to say the word misogyny, and I felt like that was a huge step.
That was.
In the right direction. And he's the only one who did it, right? Yeah. But when you say the words, but you're still following Matt Shaw, or you're still doing cons with Matt Shaw, to me, it's like the words and the actions are not quite aligned yet. Because we're allowing Matt Shaw to still be in community is allowing the behavior to fester. And it makes it unsafe for women to feel comfortable in those spaces. I'd like to think
that, so, and we all kind of we're coming at this from different points of view, just like everybody in the chat's aware. We have different stances on like following, if people are still following, if they're not following, what have you. And like if people still do associate with Matt, then like my hope is like the ideal is, even if it's not necessarily in public, because it does suck, right? You get popular, most people don't think they're going to get popular in social media, right? Like authors don't necessarily think they're going to like have books.
Social media is hard.
It's hard. And then
it's
you're being
hard.
Perceived, and that's like, people think you're a human being, and that's like terrifying, right?
Well, also when you get to the level that some of these authors are in, people, and this is what we notice, and I think especially with some of the female fans, is that people are developing parasocial relationships with these authors. They think that the relationship, there's more than just like the, author-fan relationship. It's beyond that.
And it gets wonky when it's like your friend. Like I was messaging with Jay Reads. Like the messages that I saw from other women were not the type of conversations that we were having. There was a horror
Right.
event in the city and he came and joined us. Like that's not the man that I knew, quote, you know.
Right.
And so when that did come out, like it was kind of like this what the hell moment, like how am I going to navigate this and what does it mean to me to like keep that friendship? Like with him there was like a history where I was like, okay, like let's let this go. But I think when it comes to having a fellow author do it, a friend do it, there is a whole separate pressure of like, how am I going to call this person out? But I do think even now, Naomi, in one of your recent videos, Matt Shaw's friend said, hey, what he did was misogynistic. And like, granted, I was camping when that whole situation came about. I came out from the woods so relaxed and then like came into the fire.
Isn't that the best? You're like, I'm going to take a social media break. And when I come back,
Weren't you out of town for this day read
Yeah,
situation
I was
too?
on
so
a
maybe
tropical
the solution is you don't go on vacation.
I have so many trips planned this year, guys. I apologies in advance. You know, but I am seeing now his friends are coming out and saying like that was misogynistic, like not necessarily he's a misogynist, but like that was misogynistic. And maybe I didn't see it because it could have been drowned out. But imagine how different that whole situation would have been if people just called him in, his own people called him in and said, dude, that was misogynistic. Not even just that, like that's misogynistic.
It doesn't have to be public and it doesn't have to be loud.
Right. Yeah. So like just imagine like that small little change and like maybe then his response would have changed and then it wouldn't have developed in this whole clusterfuck that it was. And like at the end of the day, that's all we are really kind of asking people to do. It doesn't have to be this whole like, okay, I'm unfollowing, I'm deading, like
so you
I know
and
we have different
right? And so I wanna phrase it like this. Let's say that you have a group of friends and one of your friends does something racist and says something racist. And the person is just like, no, I said what I said. So people are asking you, wow, your friend said something racist. And you're like, yeah, my friend said something racist. Racism is bad. I think racism is bad. Racism has no place here. But they continue to keep that person around and allow that person to be in spaces. So that's what I mean when I say the words and the actions aren't lining up. Yeah. And so, you know, it's not a question of, do you write this person off forever? Is there no way for them to redeem yourself? But in this particular situation, we haven't seen any real effort of redemption.
Yeah.
Right. And so when we think about like, oh, there's going to be a con in my area, do I as a woman feel safe attending that con? And I don't mean I who have, you know, called out like this behavior, like very directly. I personally wouldn't feel comfortable for me, but I mean for other women who might want to go to something like this because they do enjoy this genre.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly where the friends come in and being like, that's why use the word, just use the word. Yeah. And like, unfortunately, I think part of, you know, I love extreme horror. I love what it can give to people, but it is a genre that also attracts like the weird raccoons that like come in through the cracks in the wall and infiltrate the community. So like even using those terms, like it kicks those people
out. It's a huge deal.
It's a huge deal in that sense.
It does, because what I've noticed now, I've been very upfront and honest that I haven't read a lot of extreme horror. It doesn't seem that it's like something that would work for me in my life, but I have friends who read everything, and I have a lot of mutuals who read exclusively extreme horror. So I know that the community is full of a lot of women.
Yeah. Oh, it is.
A lot of women, and when you have that many women, and then you have some great men in the community, but you also have men who are drawn to the community because of the violence depicted against women.
Yeah, I have so many thoughts on splatterpunk and extreme horror, and they're all like I was trying to sort my feelings on this like really before we met up today because I have so many opinions, and I understand that as an author who doesn't really write a lot of splatterpunk. I mean, my first real splatterpunk piece came out in Candace Nola's recent Dark Dozen anthology. Like that was really my first foray into it. So I always feel, I wonder if I'm trying to speak out of turn, I suppose, in this. But I do feel like there's something to be said about the fact that we have a lot of these writers, a lot of these extreme horror writers who, you know, a lot of the time they're like, these people can't take what we're writing, and like, you know, we're so extreme, and if it's not for you, like, get out of this space. And they kind of present this very strong, tough, like, no nonsense, badass sort of personality. But then in that same breath, a lot of them are too scared to call out misogyny when they see it. And I feel really strongly about the fact that there are so many people who are in the community, who are in the genre as writers, as consumers, who are okay and actually celebrate violence and exploitation of women in fiction and cower at the idea of denouncing it in real life. And I feel like if you are scared of losing readers for talking out about misogyny, then like truly at worst, you are a coward who understands you have a misogynistic fan base. And at worst, and I would argue more accurately, you are a misogynist yourself. There's one thing between having extreme and gruesome fiction and then, you know, saying that it's fiction and going out of your way to denounce these actions in real life, than saying that, oh, it's just fiction, it doesn't matter, no one cares, and then staying silent when you see that same kind of digital violence towards the women that you allege to care about and protect and want to sort of foster a relationship with in the community. Like it feels very confused.
So here's the thing. I think, and I'm not going to name anyone, but you know, if you're in here, you know who I'm talking about. I think that I believe that these authors really do care about their female fans. I do believe that. I don't think that they don't, but I don't think they realize that staying silent and not addressing the problem or even acknowledging that the problem is something that exists and women are feeling uncomfortable about it and women are talking about it, the words and the actions aren't lining up. So I'm not saying, oh, these people are horrible people. No. They don't give a shit about their fans, because I believe that they actually do.
Oh, yeah.
I would just like to see the actions align with that, because I don't think we move forward without more participation.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
Like we move backwards in some sense, because I know somebody mentioned it in the comments, but a lot of women, you know, they stepped away from the genre during all of that, because there was a lot of really violent and downright violent like comments towards women during that whole thing. Even it kind of started popping up with Jay Reads a little bit when people were taking negatively to the word misogyny being brought up again.
Yeah.
And it's if you really want to protect your community, I really love the splatter punk community, the extreme horror community. I do read it. Maybe I'm the most out of the three of us like involved in it.
For sure.
And it's a wonderful community, and it's unfortunate that it keeps on getting attacked. Like authors, like another author just got, you know, I think took all of her books off of Amazon recently because of how hard people were coming at her. And I think that the best way to protect your community is just by being there for other members of your community, giving them a safe space to just be like, I read this book and I'm really uncomfortable. I want to discuss what made me uncomfortable, and giving them the room to do that, not meeting that with like, well, you just didn't get it, or like, of course this is happening. It's extreme horror. What did you expect? Get out of here. It's like, what is wrong with just giving somebody a little bit of breathing room to express something that is making them uncomfortable, and then we could like move on as a community? And I'm not saying like, oh, let's attack these like authors and like say they're horrible people. I'm saying when we're discussing a book that made us feel uncomfortable, or an element of a book, just give them the space to do that on Reddit, on the Facebook threads, on their video here. It's okay, and that's how you keep this community safe. And that's how, when there is an attack and people stand with it, people can take you seriously as somebody who is defending it.
Yeah. There was...
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, there was like, I was talking to someone yesterday, And I'm for sure going to butcher the way they said this, but they were like, if you want to know who I am, look at my friends, look at the company I
Yeah.
keep. And
And that's exactly it.
yeah. And like,
That's exactly it.
I feel like something I do agree. I feel like the splatterpunk community, the extreme horror always gets brought up in these things. And it's frustrating because I think for myself, something that I seem to see a lot is that people are not you. I'm not saying you, like, I'm not saying this. I do feel like some people who get very defensive of it
Yeah.
convolute the idea of bringing up issues within that community with criticizing the genre and the way women
Right.
are depicted in it. And I
Well, and
think
that's a way to get out of accountability.
that's it. Like we should, as readers, want more from what we're reading. We should want to be able to be protected in these spaces to voice concerns and
Yeah.
fears and things that made us uncomfortable, like you were saying, right?
Yeah.
With that protection from the community and the support. So, to have people getting like really angry at the idea of leveling criticism against splatterpunk, well, it's like, if I want to know who you are as a community, let me look at your friends and the company you're keeping. And if we're constantly telling women in these spaces, like, well, maybe extreme horror just isn't for you because you didn't enjoy that really graphic assault scene, that's an issue. Like, that's something we need to talk about.
And there are a couple of different layers. The first layer is somebody criticizing a scene in a book is exactly what the Matt Shaw incident was. The reviewer criticized his book, then it became she doesn't even read this genre, then it became let me launch this attack on her, dedicate this book to her, keep
My
talking
understanding,
about
too,
her
is
so trolls go after her. And it wasn't
wasn't it a
his first
different book?
rodeo.
Like,
It wasn't his
wasn't
first
even-
rodeo. Yeah, he dedicated a completely different book, like the
Yeah.
following book, and it was
'Cause I
like a
was gonna-
romance. It was a creepy romance. It
Yeah.
wasn't even a horror, whatever.
No,
right?
yeah.
But then the community itself has been attacked from people outside the community because, let's be honest, there are people who don't understand the genre and don't understand what benefit that there can be from it. So they band together and they pull together as like, this is a defense. You can't say anything critical about us whatsoever. And when you do, it's minimized to be drama. And I just saw someone say it in the comments. Maybe people don't want to get involved in the drama. But when we're talking about issues like misogyny and violence against women and women feeling comfortable in a community, that has absolutely nothing to do with drama. And to minimize it does a real disservice.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of drama, and I very much air quote drama, is just a way of minimizing digital violence to women. Because it really is
Right.
most often digital violence. Like, we're more likely to be subject to the bullying, to the harassment, to the unwanted, salacious pictures, to unwanted attention, to constant harassment, stalking, spamming. And when you voice your concern online as a woman, and everyone is suddenly dogpiling on you and saying that it's invalid or name calling or what have you, or saying like, oh, she's just being dramatic. That's like the quickest way to try to like invalidate the digital violence a person is facing. It's such an issue to me.
And I get that knee-jerk reaction. Like, I get so much hate for talking about extreme horror. People don't get it. They think I am the scum of the earth for reading and, sharing it. But so like when somebody does have a valid criticism, I get that knee-jerk reaction to be like, shut it down. But I also am able to take a breath, take a step back, like evaluate the situation and be like, no, like this is a valid criticism versus, okay, like this person's being kind of wild and like out of pocket just about like extreme horror. And it's so with niche genres, especially in like small communities where the readers and the authors are really intertwined, like, the indie horror, extreme horror is really built on a really, really tight-knit community, which I think is kind of playing into all of this.
Yeah.
But you have to let go of that knee-jerk reaction, and you have to realize, okay, they're not coming at me, they're not coming at the genre. They might be unhappy with a review that I did, how I said something, or an author, but like, it's also more telling how you respond to that than like what you actually said in your review or your book. It's like the Saw 7 effect, right? Like, like that's like in Saw 7, everything really started to become really sexualized, where like the franchise hasn't really been sexualized at that point. And like even bringing up like the hints of misogyny in like the Saw franchise at that point was like met with just extreme denials and just like get out of the fandom if you don't like it. And that's just super unfortunate because it lets the issue fester and linger.
Yeah. I feel like saying if you can't take it, get out is the quickest way to tell us that like you want to continue to be misogynistic with no consequence. Like that's
Yes.
the quickest way. They're like, oh, are you going to hold us accountable or take us to task? Then don't be here. This is
Right.
where we get to do whatever we want, right? And that's why, like, yeah, I love how you phrase that, by the way, Sonia, this idea of like fighting that knee-jerk reaction and like listening to criticism and commentary and coming at it with like an open mind.
It's
'Cause, like,
hard.
it really is though. Like it's not an easy thing. So, I don't expect people to do it overnight. Like this is such a weird conversation because I feel like it's an amalgamation of conversations I've had over like several days. But like, I was just talking to one of my best friends today about how my entire life I've been very obstinate and I want to fight people on things. And I'm like, no, how could you say this? How could you think that? Like, you're clearly like not, just getting really riled up. And in the last few years, one of the things that I've really come to accept as being important, and I think we should collectively try to take with us, is meeting people where they are. You're not going to change someone by arguing with them and telling them they're wrong. You're going to change someone's opinion and, hopefully convince them and persuade them to see things maybe more your way or maybe understand how you're feeling if you sort of meet them where they are and try to approach them more empathetically and more open-mindedly. And I feel like one of the things that's been increasingly hard about this talk of misogyny is, unfortunately, or not unfortunately, most of the community is fantastic and wants to have this conversation. I mean, there are 44 people in the room with us who are wanting to have this conversation, and that's very, like, to me, hopeful. But then I feel like some of the largest voices in the community have really dug their heels in, and meeting them where they are is in misogyny. It's in the sexism. There's no really pulling them out of it. And so, like, personally, I sort of think collectively as a community, our best sort of move is to just move on without them. Like, support the voices.
Okay,
we
so
want to hear.
that's interesting. That is that's an interesting solution. So when you say moving on from them, obviously we're talking about the very obvious one, Matt Shaw. But
Oh,
are
yeah.
we also talking about those who are actively still supporting and inviting him to cons? Like,
Yeah.
are we going to be okay with organizations that run these cons inviting these type of people? And the answer for me is we shouldn't be,
No,
because
absolutely not.
once we're not, then this happens less and less. If
Yeah.
we would have actively addressed the issue when Haley came forward with her complaint about Matt Shaw, and I see people in the comments saying what happened to Haley is nothing new. This has been something that has been ongoing. I've been attacked for reviews that I've made before. If we have some of the people who have more of the influence coming out and saying, hey, there's no room for this here. If you
Yeah.
say there is no room for this here, you make these people feel unwanted in the community and they won't stick around. And then maybe the situation like the Jay Reed situation doesn't happen, because there was a lot of misinformation about the Jay Reed situation. There was like, oh, well, he didn't actually have any pictures to send anyway. That's not the point. Did you see
That
that
isn't,
video?
yeah.
He was
Yeah.
threatening to send him. And it was such a level of anger that I have seen before. And you see that in people who are physically abusive to people in real life. Right? And so by historically not coming out and speaking out against issues like this, we allow it to fester and continue. And it's only going to get worse. And how far are we willing to let it go?
Well, there was, God, I
Right?
forget who it was who talked about this, or maybe this is like a well-known fact and I'm just imagining it's attributed to someone. But there's this idea that like if you are with a group of people and somebody comes in and they make, a misogynistic or racist or transphobic joke and everyone laughs, you're emboldening them. You're letting them think that what they said was okay. that you're
Well, if
comfortable
everyone
with
laughs and
that.
you're laughing, then you're a
Exactly.
racist or a misogynist.
But
I
yeah,
mean,
but I mean, if nobody
and
like
and
speaks up,
I'd argue that if you're not speaking up, you are one as well.
But that's what I'm saying, right? Like if somebody makes these jokes and like people laugh because they're uncomfortable with standing up for it, or they're like, don't say anything because they're worried because all their friends laugh, like anything like that, then the person who made that joke is going to think that they can make another one, and then they're going to
Right.
see if they can push it a little further, and then they're going to
Right.
push it even further, and next thing you know, you just have a group of like misogynist, racist, or transphobes all talking shit to each other, and
Yeah.
suddenly this idea that was like, haha, funny joke, which wasn't a funny joke, but they thought was like something they could get away with, has grown into a bigger problem. And that's honestly how I see this misogyny in the community. People will make misogynistic comments, will just do misogynistic things, have very misogynistic rhetoric, and then we all are kind of like, okay, well, I don't like it, but we're not going to really freak out or push back collectively. It sort of feels like a lot of the time. And then they think, well, I got away with it once, nobody really minds. And they kind of keep going and it amps up and it amps up. And suddenly we're stuck having this conversation because collectively we have not pushed back enough collectively. I do think a lot of women and femmes are really doing a lot of the hard work when it comes to pushing back on misogyny. And we need more of those friends, more of those male friends in these groups to be like, hey, that joke isn't funny. Like, that is sexist. Like, that is misogynistic. And it can be on a one-on-one private basis. It doesn't have to be
Yes.
publicly. But just
Right.
saying that you can't do that is what's important.
Or
Like,
even
that's what you
something
have
as
to do.
simple as liking the comments that are having the conversation, like
Yeah.
just showing that you are in that corner. I will say that I was happy with how quickly people were to shut the Jay situation down. I think he was kind of like, a newer person in the community, so maybe he didn't have like big roots, and
Yeah.
having those roots is hard to work around. But it really was nice, like, James Rath White was just like, no. Gabino was like, no. And it was such a simple statement. Like, I don't necessarily see that affecting anybody's sales. If anything, I think people are going to rally around the people who are doing it because that's like what we should be encouraging. So then, like, I went back and I was like, okay, which books of yours don't I have? And like, let's support that in that way. So I
Can I?
ideally,
I just want to throw this out there. And because I have a feeling that it was so easy for those two authors that you mentioned to come out, is because they are authors of color and their fan base may not be the same fan base that is being actively misogynist.
that's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like that's one of the things that I feel really frustrated by is that is really what I see. It's a lot of like men, masks of color, who are coming out and talking about misogyny, and they're like not standing for it, and they're being very like wonderful in preventing sexism in the community, and it's great and I love it. But it sucks to see so much labor put on everyone else when we need to have, like, realistically, some of the biggest names in the genre are like cishet white men. And we need more cishet white men to stand up for us and say, this isn't okay. And if you are a cishet white author and you are writing and you're worried to make a statement that like denounces misogyny because you're scared you're not going to sell books, who the fuck are you writing for? Who are you
Right.
writing for? What is your
Yeah.
desired audience?
And the weird thing is, like, so I have gone to a few cons, and it's so like it's a mind trip because I've been to cons. At my first con, there was a man who was making me pretty uncomfortable, like following me, like coming up and standing, like getting in my path and like just not saying like no conversation, just like standing there like in my way.
That's awful,
And one of my con friends and I were talking about it, but it was in front of Daniel and Aaron, and they were so quick to be like, no woman here is going to be made to feel uncomfortable. Like, tell us who it is, and they're out. Like, they're kicked out of the con. And it didn't need to get to that situation. I'm like, no, this is just weird. But from that point on, like, there was this sense of like, if anything happens, like, let us know. And I just kind of, I wonder where that gets like a little lost in translation to like the online world, because I see it play out and I see how much they care and I see how much they're willing to kind of dead it when it does present in like real time. And I guess there's like that permanency. There's, you know, the raccoons that kind of come into this community are still buying the books, unfortunately. But that is one of the reasons why I was so happy to see Daniel actually just say the word. And like,
I was happy to see it too. Aaron,
Yeah.
on the other hand, not satisfied at all with his response at all, and he actually blocked me because I asked him to say the word misogyny. So I don't think he's open to conversation. He minimalizes it and says it's basically drama, and he doesn't want to bring any negativity to his page. To me, that translates to, I'm not going to say anything because I know the type of people who are buying my books, and I'm not going to lose my money.
Yeah.
That's what it translates to me. And I appreciate that they did that in person and in real life. But the reason that it doesn't translate online is because in person, it's a much smaller audience. Online, it reaches so many more people. And the minute you, as a man who is writing these types of books, comes out and says, hey, maybe like don't treat women that way, you stupid piece of shit. You know what I mean? Some of these people, some of these incels who are reading the books, they're gonna be like, wow, you just lost all your cred, bro.
Yeah. No. Also, sorry, I saw Cassidy or Cassidy, I think it's Cassidy, say that raccoons are cuter than misogynists, and I've never agreed with the sentiment more. I just had to say that in the.
I do
Put
think
it
raccoons have
on
been
a
hunting me,
t-shirt.
but yes.
Put it on a t-shirt, please.
Facts.
I'm writing it down right now.
Like, objectively correct.
And I think, and I, you know, I think like out of all of us, like I have the least like very willing to admit that, like, you know, I am like, let's see how people, you know, keep responding, and that's where I am. People are going to draw their own lines. I am happy to see the goal. Like, I'm happy to see any movement in the right direction. So like, I know that Aaron wasn't allowed or didn't say the word, but I'm hoping that with Daniel coming forward, scary, let's be real, that was probably kind of scary for him. The domino now like gets shifted with more authors coming forward. So I'm hoping that like they're finding their own sense of community amongst themselves to be able to be like, okay, like, no, we're shutting this down. And I'm willing to kind of see authors like make that growth within themselves. Like, obviously, if this is like 3 years down the line and like this is happening, you know, let's revisit. But I just think that finding that space to navigate, I want to give them the grace to do that. But I know, but I also think it's very fair. People, like, there are some people who are like, no, like, that's not who I want in my life. Block, unfollow. That's like, I get that. Like, I completely understand where people are coming from in that situation too.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I saw after they had both come out and made a statement, and the woman had come out and said, "Oh my God, this story isn't true," even though there was just like a difference of understanding about what had happened. These same authors were in her comments saying, "Oh my God, thank you so much for clearing things up," as if what we had presented was simply a lie to get them involved and make them look bad. And so I don't know if that brought us back to square one, quite frankly. But like you said, like I think there may be hope for Daniel. I really don't have faith that there would be hope for Aaron. But that's just a personal opinion, and people can jump to their own conclusions and make the decisions for themselves.
I mean, there's a great comment that I'm so sorry to interject. It's just, I think it makes,
fine.
It's just, how many opportunities have they had though? How many more do they need? It's by Carly's Growing TBR. I think that's a really valid question. And like, I'm not aiming to answer this for anyone, because I do think that's something that we individually need to sit with and decide what that limit is. Because like, I don't want to be like, I'm a centrist, because that's not accurate at all. I'm like the most left-leaning woman alive.
No, right,
like, I do feel in this issue, I oddly fall between like the two of you, because like, I agree with Sonia, like no one is perfect. We've all made mistakes, right? Like, I want to give them that grace to grow and to change. I think there's a really dangerous trend that I've seen online, especially with a lot more like left-leaning communities, that like I'm guilty of as well, where it's like, we do want that person to have always been perfect and to never make a mistake. I think
Yeah.
it's really easy to feel upset and almost betrayed when someone you value or look up to.
It's parasocial, man.
Right.
Exactly, right? But like, screws
Yeah.
up. You can't help but feel kind of bad about that. But like, I also want to give these people that room to improve and change. And I understand that, like, especially for a lot of men who are really entrenched in this community, that making that change and being vocal is
Yeah.
hard. It can be
It
difficult.
is.
It can be scary.
Right.
But also, like, how many times do we have to have these kind of incidents? Like, how many times do we have to see women in the community come forward and say that they're feeling unsafe, that they've been feeling victimized, that they do not feel like they're being valued or protected in the communities that they've been a part of for like years and years and years? Like, at what point do we draw that line with some of these bigger names? It's why I really am kind of advocating for this idea of like, if you are tired of seeing these same people do the same thing every time this shit happens, stop reading them. Find the
Yeah.
authors who care about your interests and your genre, you know?
So
Also,
I
read
see.
the women authors in
Yes.
extreme horror, right? Like they
Yeah.
exist. They're
Yep.
amazing. Like, and
So I see
yeah, sorry.
Sadie's comment. She's no longer reading extreme horror for men, and waiting to see like how they deal with it. And I think that's completely valid. And I would go as far to say, and this is, I'm not saying everybody should do this, but I am really hesitant at this point to read any horror by someone who is not a woman or is not a man who is marginalized in some way, whether that be queer or a person of color. Because I've been disappointed way too many times by cishet white men in this genre. And I'll give an example of a traditional horror writer that had sort of some attention lately, and I brought attention to it as well, and that's Philip for Casey, who found a review online that someone wrote of him, didn't like it, and then the review was by a woman, and he went after her looks. I had his book on my bookshelf, and I was so looking forward to it, and I sold it. I didn't
That's
even read it.
disappointing
I'm
to hear
obviously,
that.
I'm obviously not going to talk about it, and it's not something that I'm going to continue to give room to. But when I'm thinking of things like, oh, I really want to go to StokerCon this year, how welcome am I going to be in that space when, I'm being so vocal about these things?
Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty much on board with you on this one. I basically only read books. Well, I basically don't read books, I should maybe clarify, from like cishet white men. Like, that's the only thing I think where I'm like, no, I'm okay. I'm actually good though. Like,
I mean, they kind of have, there's kind of some like, because I'm not saying that I won't, because
Yeah.
I love Chuck Wendig.
Oh,
If he does something wrong, I'm going to be like devastated. I will be completely devastated. But I am also the type of person that even though I will be devastated and I'm a huge fan, I'll be right here talking about it.
yeah, that's fair.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I
But
feel
also,
like
like, let's. Sorry, go on now.
what's been especially disappointing in these recent situations is that it's not just the men who have shown to be a little bit problematic. It's the women in the community who don't question what is happening and who come to the defense of men when they don't really deserve it, when they're not really earning it.
And I think
And
that's where
it's
that defensive component does come in, because like they're falling back on this is our community, we're protecting, and like not taking a step back. I'm not necessarily sure I know which, like, what you're referring to specifically, but just like the defense mechanism of like my community I'm defending. So the name that I recognize, without just being like, okay, like take a second, just take a second, think about it. Like,
Right.
and like, the big thing too, and we've talked about it, but like with the Philip Fracassi thing, like that was one of my favorite books of last year. And then
Yeah.
that weird exchange happened, and like that, like it's okay if people misstep, and I especially think like in like I guess I wouldn't call him an indie horror writer, but like he is has been indie,
Yeah.
and there is such a crossover of authors interacting with fans that doesn't translate outside of that bubble. And now that extreme horror is getting bigger, that bubble is growing. Finding your footing is really weird. So, and I don't remember what he said exactly. I know he came after her looks and he apologized, saying like, that's not like how I intended it to come off. Like,
Yeah.
okay, so like keep that in the back of my head going, like, but like going
Right.
forward, but like
That's
that's
it.
going to stay there. But like, it's not just like somebody says one thing and like, oh my God, they're canceled. Like,
Yeah.
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 I would, I'm not suggesting people don't read him at all. It's just for me, that's enough for me.
Yeah.
I've seen enough, and
yeah,
I'm not going to
people are
continue
going
to
to
read.
form their
But
own boundaries.
Yeah.
But when you have multiple things going on and it's the same players staying silent, that's where I'm kind of like, okay, I'm saying something because nobody else is. You know what I mean? And so I am glad now that at least here, there are 44 people in here right now. People are interested in having these conversations.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important. So I'm going to ask you guys a question because, like, as I've said, I don't read a lot of extreme horror. And I know that there are people who do read the genre in here as well, both men and women, or who at least used to and participate in it. Do you think the genre itself is inherently misogynistic?
I don't.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate?
So I think with it's kind of like horror itself, right? Kind of grounded on misogyny. We've seen those tropes kind of start getting dismantled a little bit, like especially with like something like Maxine coming out, where like the final girl is the slut, is the promiscuous one, right? Like horror is shifting. And I think with extreme horror, like, is it misogynistic? No. Can it shine a spotlight on misogyny? Absolutely. And I'm not even saying that because this book is all about women in cages or women getting their abdomen shredded by a giant thing, right? And that can happen. Like that's like when I'm talking about misogyny and horror, I'm not talking about like disgusting, depraved things happening to women. I am taking note of like the tone of some of the writing when those awful things aren't happening. Just like, because as a woman, I think that's what we all do just by default. So that's not what I have an issue with. When the misogyny component comes in is like, okay, some authors maybe all like they have 5 books and all of their books are just like one long fantasy grape type situation. Then I might be like, okay, like I'm going to take a step back from that, but then like, let's look at what you're saying outside of your books. Let's see what your response is if somebody has an issue with one of your books. I think their response to that is a lot more telling of what's inside of the book, because some of the best people write the most depraved things. And I love like, that's one of my favorite things about the genre is like, they're the most fluffy people and they're writing the most depraved things in the world. So like, we're looking at the whole package, but inherently, I do not think it's a problematic genre.
I'm not really secretive about it. I teach, I'm an English professor outside of here. And one of the things I like to say is that media doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's not like one day we're sitting here, there's a loud thunderclap and like a new splatterpunk book was added to the literary canon. Thank you, universe. Right? Like people write this stuff. People read this stuff. And I think calling the genre misogynistic as a whole is really black and white to me. Like it's really like very, like it's a narrow lens to look at a large genre. So I don't think that it is inherently misogynistic. But much like Sonia, I think it's important to look at the people who are creating it. Like I'm very much not somebody who believes in death of the author. I think that the author is omnipresent in everything you are consuming. If you are reading something, like Harry Potter, right, from a transphobe, and you are giving a transphobe your money, whether or not you mean for them to or not, whether you believe it or not, you are giving them that cash. You are promoting and supporting them, and then they'll continue to write stuff that, whether they intend to or not, reflects their worldview. So I don't think the genre is misogynistic. Do I, however, think that it is a great genre for misogynists to hide? Yes. I
Yeah.
think that a lot of times it can be easy to look at a book and be like, oh, it's you know, it's extreme violence and it's not misogynistic. It's just one very long grape fantasy with torture. That's just a staple of the genre. But like, how is that author behaving outside of that? How is that author building a character? What is the point of the story? I think you can, like, I was talking about this earlier, but if you look at like Last House on the Left, if we look at I Spit on Your Grave, I would argue that if they had been written as books today, we would find them very likely in the extreme
For
or
sure.
like splatterpunk community. I
Yeah.
think those films did tremendous things. They were a fantastic way of looking at these like serious issues, including misogyny, through the splatterpunk lens. It, you know, these pieces elevated the genre and commented on socio-political issues. That was fantastic. So I don't think the genre is misogynistic, but I do think when we sort of approach the genre either with like this death of the author mentality or this sort of, you know, media illiteracy approach because we don't want to understand the deeper meaning behind things and really unpack what the author is getting at, that's when we have a problem. That's when misogyny, misogynist, and misogynistic work that forwards these ideas hides in plain sight. And then kind of when criticism is leveled, if we're not looking carefully enough, it's easy to just be like, oh, you just don't like extreme horror. Like, I think that's sort of my thing. So,
And
Yeah.
extreme horror, I think, like, also is one of these genres that can also challenge extreme misogyny because their characters get to do things that you can't necessarily do in other genres, like Talia by Volpe, Red Station by Kenzie Jennings, like even Black Farm by like Elias Witherow, like where it was the male who was placed in the position that we usually see the woman placed in most splatterpunk. Like, that's amazing. I love seeing these nuanced takes that like where like it is very depraved and it's really sick, but like at the end of the day, it's a story of like maybe very sick and twisted, but of triumph. And I love that extreme horror can do that. And I don't even necessarily have a problem with books that are the big sequences of just violence. Like, have at it. My problem comes in when somebody does say something as simple as, I'm a little bit uncomfortable, and they just get torn down, not even just by the author, but by the community. And just like, if we can just add a nugget of empathy for those conversations and just open it up where we're not leading with that knee-jerk reaction to defend the genre, we're only going to get stronger, because saying you're uncomfortable with something doesn't mean that you are morally against that book. And that does come into play, though. Also, like, you know, we can't deny that with extreme horror. I think with What Good Girls Do, I love that book by Butcher. Like, it taught me, like, okay, like, this is my deep end. I'm going to defend to the death everybody whose deep end is further than mine, because I feel like they should be able to read what they want to read. But just give people that empathy to express doubt of what they're reading, to even question the morality a little bit. Like, it's not an inherently bad thing to do. And it just builds a stronger sense of community. I just wish we could just do that a little bit easier. And then I feel like so many issues in this community would kind of like sort themselves out a little bit too, because we're giving people the grace to do that.
oh yeah. I also find it weird too, because like extreme horror really likes to kind of label itself as like a genre with the goal of like eliciting a response and a reaction from the reader. So I always find it wild when it's like, people have those responses, those evocative sort of reactions, those visceral sort of, you know, commentaries, and then they're met with like so much criticism for having those reactions that the books are like setting out to provoke. And sometimes I do feel like when they say that these books are meant to get a rise and a reaction and like an extreme feeling, they mean it, but only if it's the extreme feeling they want you to have. Otherwise, you know, that's sort of where the problem becomes.
I think, there's always been in the horror community, and I'm even thinking of like with film as well, that there is always somebody who like they want to one up you in a way. Like when you say, "Oh, I found this really scary," they're like, "Well, that's not scary. Have you ever watched?"
Yeah.
And I forget what the movie is that
A
always comes
Serbian
up, but
film?
Oh my God, yeah, it's always a Serbian
every
film.
it's always a Serbian film, and it's like, well,
Always.
I didn't even find that disturbing, and you can't handle that, and it's just like, can we talk about why? You know?
And like and I was talking to Caitlin about this earlier, but like even using What Good Girls Do as an example, like a Neighborhood Ghoul, I do also think that splatterpunk is such a good catharsis genre.
Yeah.
But with What Good Girls Do, I know that the author right now is kind of getting some flack from people, and
Tell me more because I'm not familiar with the situation.
I don't necessarily like he just mentioned it in some videos. And so what Good Girls Do is he writes from the perspective of a young girl. I don't want to get this live band, but goes through it. Like it is so like when I say a book like you just feel that dry heave like building in your gut, but I just think he does a really good job of putting you in the position of being victimized and being like in that situation. There is some some reviews now are saying that it's like fetishizing. I'm Polish, I can't say my s's. A little bit too much, and I don't agree with that. I think the way that he wrote the book was brilliant, but if I'm having that conversation with somebody who does think that, like, I'm going to let you say your piece, and like I do want to have that discussion with you because I want to make sure that you feel that you can say that in this community. I don't have to agree with you. I'm going to empathize with you though. That's different than like somebody being like, well, this author needs to go to hell. Like that's a different conversation, but like we're all gonna have like our, and I know like the word trigger is triggering in the community right now too. We're all gonna have our triggers. We're all gonna have our limits. Like that's fine. Right. Just like give people the grace to have those limits and work through them. And like it doesn't mean they don't belong in the genre.
Yeah.
Right. I agree. So do you think what books do you recommend that are there books that criticize misogyny that are splatterpunk books that kind of take a different approach to it, like as a way to maybe like that you can tell that they're actively trying to say something versus this is on the page just to demonstrate this scene? Like, is there a bigger are there books that there's a bigger picture?
I think
because
Red Station by Kendi Jennings is great. Like, I know that's like not the most extreme, like there's some extreme elements in that, but I think that the way that she presents her characters, like who the characters turn out to be, like it's wonderful. And like maybe not necessarily like, okay, we're like Ruth Ann, I don't know if I pronounce her name correctly, but Ruth Ann Jag, I am on, like she writes some really like vile, like keeping it up there. I don't know why she's not more popular than she is. And like, is there a necessary theme of it? Like, no, but like the way that she handles the assault, it's also just so much different. And like, and that's why I do gravitate towards women in the genre, just because it does come with a completely different feel to it. I mean, there's also like, I do like Talia by Volpe. I think that was like at the time, like that was like a great way just to see somebody like, like her end isn't just being dumped and killed after being used. She's coming back and she's taking revenge. Like I really do appreciate like stories like that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't read a lot of splatterpunk, but I was going to say if there is a go-to author, I do feel like Candace Nola. I think Wendy actually just was talking about
everything.
Her. Yeah, like Candace is, like she's just incredibly talented. Now, I don't necessarily know if anything is like overtly intended to comment on misogyny, but I do feel like there is at times a sort of like through line of just like, yeah. And she's just, in general, I'm just a Nola fan, so like
Same.
that is
Everything she
also-
does in the community, I think just
Oh, she's great.
she's consistently amazing. Her and Sadie, like I'm taking my lead. I just want like, how can
Yeah.
I be a better member of this community? Like, but Candace Nola is like, I'm following in her footsteps. But if you do just like want like, May Leitz is amazingly like another author who just like rips the soul out of my body and just like leaves my intestines on the floor. She writes incredibly graphic but really good. I'm currently reading, I really like it. I think Asia Brito Guerrero is her name. She is, I just love lyrical gross writing. If you can write a splatterpunk and make it lyrical, I'm in. Like I love that so much. But Nicole Cushing's The Sadist Bible just like throw me off a cliff with that one. There's so many good women in this genre who are writing, and uplift them, like have their voices, told. Maybe it doesn't have like the anti-message, but like it's just different writing.
Yeah. Ruth Anna Evans, I think,
know-
also does a lot of those as well. Her writing's always pretty fun. I think she did one recently of like medical horror and like extreme horror, which is always kind of fun. Because
Like
like,
was a primal scream. Like that is the perfect way to.
oh yeah, that's good.
Do you have a recent video with the like female splatterpunk writer recommendations, like the ones that you just mentioned? And can I put that on you and give that to you as a hint idea?
Yeah, I made one not too long ago. I'm having an issue with a lot of my videos being taken down, so I don't know what's going on right now. That was when that was taken down. I had a BIPOC one that was taken down, but like I had a lot of. I don't think they're being. I really don't think they're being targeted. I just I got a copyright infringement for copywriting myself.
Okay.
And ever since then, so many of my videos are being taken down. Like if you look at all of my videos, there's probably going to be a woman on it. So in the next few weeks, I'm taking all the videos that were taken down and putting them back onto my platform, and hopefully not getting more strikes on it.
I think, are you in the creator program?
Yeah.
Or the creator fund?
Yeah.
Whatever. So part of the problem is they recognize it as a video that's already been posted, and that's why you're getting hit with like the content violation or it not being original content. So because you already uploaded it once, if you upload it again, it's probably going to happen again.
Oh, so maybe just do them all over again then. Got it.
Yeah.
That's annoying.
Hi, Brandon.
Oh my God, get off. Don't try it.
Oh, Wendy just left, so I'm saying bye to
I
Wendy. She's
love Wendy
fantastic
too.
too.
So tell me what you're reading now. Is anybody reading anything?
Yes, but I'm totally forgetting the name of the book. Oh, hold on. Just other phoning
Pull
it.
up your Kindle. I actually read such a good collection of like dark speculative fiction for uncomfortably dark. I'm on my phone, so I can't check who it is, but I'm going to be mentioning her in a video. But I am reading right now Asia Brito Guerrero, and I'm very, very early into her book. But again, if you can make extreme lyrical, you have me. Like, no, you just have me.
yeah.
I love that writing. I'm also reading May Leitz's first novella, which I am sure is going to completely destroy me, and I'm very excited for that. What are you reading?
I found the name of it.
Okay, what is it?
It is Inkvine by Elizabeth Broadbent. I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about it because I'm actually blurbing it. So technically it's not out yet. But fantastic. I was supposed to get the blurb to her earlier, but I mean, I haven't talked about it. My mom was actually in and out of the hospital for a little bit. So like I didn't get the blurb to them fast enough. So I'm trying to get it to them tomorrow. But Inkvine, amazing. So when that comes out, everyone just buy that book, and then she won't get mad at me that I haven't sent it.
Yes, like my blurb's on it.
Yeah.
Girl Flesh is the book that I was thinking of. Thank you. Thank you, Amanda.
That one's good. I feel like I've heard of that like from a million people, like everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, so far, I again, I'm such an easy person to please. It's ridiculous. Like you don't have to try hard with me, which is like why like it's if I can even recognize like this is an issue, like come on, guys. But Meg Stockton is also, I'm about to start her new one. Like I love Meg Stockton's work. I think she needs to be up there with the big three, the big four. I don't understand how people are sleeping on these extreme horror women authors. It's like almost enraging because they're so good.
So if they're not really being talked about or promoted, how are you finding out about them? Where are you getting these recommendations from?
I do deep dives onto Reddit, some Facebook groups. I legitimately Google like extreme horror written by women, like extreme horror written by whatever I want to find, because I do want those voices. It's really important for me as a reader to find those voices. And I feel like I do read more and it's easier for me to stay in the community when I am actively participating and finding like what I want. So
Yeah.
it's like a little bit frustrating because when you look through videos, you might not find them, but then it's like that weird catch-22 where people want to talk about what's popular because that's going to gain traction.
Yeah.
So they don't necessarily want to talk about like the weird generation bloodbaths and things like that, which, I understand social media is freaking weird and messes with you in weird ways. So like, I completely get that, but I am going to continue searching out those books so I can keep on talking about them.
Yeah, I'm lucky. I get sent stuff to read. It's like the upside and downside of very luckily getting to write books, is that people see that you've written one and suddenly they want you to read theirs. And so I don't think I've had to look very hard for a book in my life. So I've been very fortunate in that. And I do tend to get a lot of women who reach out to me, which is wonderful because like, yeah, I feel like it's really important to promote other women in the industry. I know getting into it was really hard. I didn't know a lot of women who were writers. So whenever I can help give another one a leg up or extend
I love that.
and help, women, femmes, anyone who's marginalized, I try to. So.
Yeah. And like for what little it does, like when I do have another, woman femme who starts to review extreme horror, then like give them the do we call it reblogs on here? Whatever. Like give them the reblog. Like, there's space for literally everybody. Like there's enough. If you make space, there is space. So make space for the voices that you want to hear because the algorithm is trash, right? Like we know I don't know if we're allowed to say it or if the live will get taken down, but we know that it doesn't boost certain videos. So just offer that hand.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a really important, and part of how I want to use my platform is making sure that I am promoting women in horror. Although I'm reading books by men right now. So I am reading the Angel of Indian Lake by Stephen Graham Jones.
I want that.
It's hard to read because I don't want the story to end. I'm so in love with the main character and that we just get like a different kind of final girl here. And then next on my list is Forgotten Sisters by Cynthia Pelayo.
Yes.
And I should be receiving the arc for Gabino Iglesias' book in the mail, hopefully this week.
I said it earlier, but I want to make 2024 the year of Pelayo. I think she, can we please platform the heck out of her? Because and that's exactly like when you platform diverse voices, you get these stories that like, they're the same tropes, but used in such interesting ways that it's just like, holy, like my book rut is gone because I finally have something that feels fresh and new. And I absolutely just it feels so good, and it just keeps you invested in especially if you're a genre reader. Like, I'll branch out here and there, but like, let's be real, I'm a genre reader. I predominantly read horror and thrillers. So when you add those voices, it stops everything from feeling stale. It gives you such new perspective on a trope that we're like, holy shit, how did I not think about that before? Like, this is like an amazing new final girl, or like, that's what I love about making room for people.
Yeah, agree. So can we agree that this is not the end of the conversation? This is just the beginning of the conversation. And this is something that I think we'd like to be ongoing in a variety of different ways. And I am so happy for everybody who came in earlier, and who has stuck around the entire time. Thank you. I would certainly like to hear mutuals, or even if we're not, message me either here on Instagram. Let me know what you thought of the live. Let me know if there are things that, were a hit or a miss for you, something that you agreed with or disagreed with. I would love, because it's kind of hard to read the comments when we're talking.
Yeah, I felt really bad.
Yeah.
That I missed. I would love feedback, but I also want to know, like, were there things that you disagreed with? Were there things that you agreed with? Were there things that you thought we should have talked about, but we completely skipped over? I would love to hear that. Any final closing thoughts from anybody, or anybody in the comments?
I'm going to remain my optimist and just say that, like, I know that people feel like certain authors aren't doing enough, and I completely understand that point of view. But I do feel hopeful in what I have seen with the J. Reid situation, and it does make me hopeful for when that next cycle comes, because it's going to come, that we are going to continue building as a community, and maybe the people who weren't comfortable speaking out might start speaking out in ways that feel a little bit more on point to the conversation, that maybe people will stop calling it drama, because they're starting to realize that, like, no, the community as a whole is taking things seriously, and it's only making us better.
Yeah.
I
like that. Maybe let's try to hold on to some of your optimism.
Okay, I'll like come every week and just like sprinkle a little bit on you. And then like once every month you just punch me in the face.
I truly do want to believe, and I mentioned it earlier, I think the only way that we do move forward is if some of the people that we talked about, or some of the people that we didn't talk about, just the men in general in the community, we don't move forward if they don't continue to grow.
Yeah.
So, and if there is a space for them, or if we want to remain in the space.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely feel like I'm kind of holding on to both of this. I think the optimism is important, but more so than just this conversation, I sort of think like the way, like I think without intending to, we have collectively started already moving towards that solution of like, if the men in the community are not going to speak up, if the ones that we are hoping will change don't, then I think it's incumbent on us to be that change. And I think the fact that we are like already just in this chat talking about authors in splatterpunk who we want to promote who aren't the voices of misogyny, the fact that we're even having this conversation is a great step like in that solution direction. So like I feel very good about this. I feel like hopefully we keep having these conversations where we uplift creators who care about the community the same way we do.
Yeah, I know that there are a lot of people who would love to be added to the conversation for ongoing conversations. So it might even look like a bigger panel next time, or different faces. But I'm excited to continue having this conversation. And it's always nice to spend time with two of the most lovely women in the community.
Well, thank you too. Yeah. It's great.
So I think I'm going to end the live. I think it's a good place to end the live. But like I said, if you have any feedback or any input or any comments, or, stuff that you disagree with on or strongly disagreed with, I'd love to hear it. I'd love to hear from you. So.
Yeah, same.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Good night, all.